Before we step into the world of Frankenstein, I want you to pause for just a moment and imagine something. Imagine you possess the ultimate power, the power to create life. What would you build? A perfect being? A masterpiece of your own design? Or something far more fragile, far more human, shaped not only by brilliance, but by your fears, your flaws, your ambitions? And if the life you created turned out wrong, broken, rejected, misunderstood, what would you do then? Would you embrace it, guide it, or would you recoil and abandon your creation to the darkness? This is not just a question for Victor Frankenstein. It is a question for all of us. Because the real horror of Frankenstein is not the creature made of stitched limbs and trembling flesh. It is the monster born from neglect, from fear, from the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. In this journey, we peel back the layers of Mary Shelley's masterpiece, a story not about a monster, but about the monster within. This is not a tale of jump scares. This is a descent into the depths of human ambition, loneliness, and the fragile boundary between creation and destruction. Welcome to Frankenstein, the Anatomy of a Modern Tragedy. Welcome to Velvet Audiobooks. Introduction: The Birth of a Modern Myth. Before we enter Victor Frankenstein's world of frozen mountains, feverish ambition, and unbearable regret, we must step back to where this story truly began, not in a laboratory, but beside a quiet Swiss lake, under a storm-heavy sky. It was the summer of 1816, a summer history now remembers as the year without a sun. The sky was dim, the air cold, and Europe was wrapped in a strange, melancholy gloom after a distant volcanic eruption darkened the world. In a villa on the shores of Lake Geneva, a small group of young writers gathered to escape the relentless rain. Among them was an 18-year-old woman named Mary Shelley, brilliant, curious, haunted by questions larger than her age. One night, as thunder rolled across the mountains, someone proposed a challenge: let each of us write a ghost story. Simple, playful. But for Mary Shelley, this challenge became the spark of a legend. She could not sleep that night. Her mind wandered, turning the storm outside into a storm within. And in that feverish space between waking and dreaming, she saw a vision, a pale student of forbidden science kneeling beside the thing he had created, watching it begin to move. She woke trembling, not with fear but with understanding. Because in that moment, Mary Shelley was not simply imagining a monster. She was imagining consequence, the weight of ambition, the loneliness of creation, the tragedy of giving life without giving love. This was not a ghost story. This was a warning about the arrogance of human mastery, about the responsibility we owe to what we create, whether inventions, discoveries, or even the people in our lives, and about the unbearable truth that neglect can shape a monster far more efficiently than evil ever could. When Frankenstein was published in 1818, the world didn't know what to make of it. Here was a novel written by a teenage girl, a story more philosophical than frightening, more tragic than supernatural, more human than horrific. But over the centuries, the world caught up to Mary Shelley's vision. Today, Frankenstein stands as one of the most influential works in human history, not just literature, but science, ethics, psychology, and storytelling itself. It is the foundation of the mad scientist archetype, the ancestor of modern science fiction, the blueprint for every tale where humanity loses control of the power it seeks. Yet at its heart, it is still a story about one man and one abandoned being, both broken in different ways. A creator consumed by ambition. A creation consumed by loneliness, both victims of each other. In this audiobook, we're not simply retelling the plot. We are unraveling the human tragedy that runs beneath it, the guilt, the fear, the longing, the moral failing, the profound emotional landscape Mary Shelley painted with unmatched insight. This is not a monster story. This is a story about responsibility, about the hunger to be seen, about the consequences of running from the things we fear most, especially when we ourselves created them. Now, let's begin our journey into the snow, into the laboratory, into the mind of Victor Frankenstein and the soul of the being he brought into the world. Welcome again to Velvet Audiobooks. Chapter 1: The Man Chasing the Impossible. Our story does not begin with a bolt of lightning or the flicker of a laboratory lamp. It begins in the frozen silence of the Arctic, a place where the world feels stripped of everything except truth. Captain Robert Walton, an explorer driven by a hunger for discovery, leads an expedition northward. He dreams of finding a passage through the ice, a feat no man has ever achieved. But beneath that dream lies something deeper. Something he does not yet admit: the desire to prove himself exceptional. And it is in this unforgiving landscape, surrounded by endless sheets of ice and howling winds, that Walton encounters a figure who will change his life and ours. A sled appears in the distance, moving across the white wasteland like a ghost. On it, a man barely alive. Frozen, exhausted, burned not by fire, but by obsession. His name is Victor Frankenstein. Walton rescues him, brings him aboard the ship, and slowly, very slowly, Victor begins to speak. Not in full sentences at first, but in whispers, in fragments, in the kind of trembling confessions only a broken man can make. Walton, fascinated, writes every word into his journal. Because even before Victor tells his story, Walton senses something familiar in him, a reflection of his own ambition, but twisted, shattered, carried to its catastrophic extreme. Victor is a warning, a living, breathing warning. And so chapter 1 becomes the beginning of a story within a story, a man consumed by his dream telling his tale to another man on the brink of the same fate. Victor begins not with horror, but with his childhood. He describes growing up in Geneva, surrounded by love, comfort, privilege, everything he could ever need. He speaks of his adoptive sister, Elizabeth, whose presence was like a light in his life. He speaks of Henry Clerval, his closest friend, whose imagination and kindness balanced Victor's intensity. Victor was not a neglected child. He was a cherished one, loved deeply, protected completely. And maybe that was the problem. Because Victor's life was so safe, so sheltered, that when he discovered the idea of forbidden knowledge, he fell into it with the hunger of someone who had never tasted fear. As a teenager, he becomes obsessed with ancient alchemists, men who believed they could turn metals into gold, summon spirits, and unlock the secrets of life itself. His father dismisses these old texts with a careless wave of the hand. But that dismissal, that single moment, becomes the spark that ignites everything. Victor begins to crave knowledge that lies beyond the limits of what is known. Not the safe, predictable knowledge taught in classrooms, but the kind that bends the laws of nature. He wants not to understand life, but to command it. When he goes to university in Ingolstadt, his curiosity evolves into ambition burning, consuming ambition. His professors teach science, chemistry, anatomy, but Victor is not satisfied. He wants more. He wants the forbidden. He wants the impossible. And in that hunger, that intoxicating blend of genius and arrogance, we see the shape of the tragedy forming. By the end of chapter 1, the stage is set. Walton watches Victor with a mixture of admiration and dread. He sees echoes of himself in this man. He wonders if he too is chasing a dream that will destroy him. Victor, weakened but determined, begins to share the full story, the story of how he crossed the line between creation and catastrophe. And so, on an ice-locked ship in the middle of the Arctic night, surrounded by the silence of the world's edge, Victor Frankenstein opens the door to the nightmare he unleashed. Chapter 2, The Birth of Obsession. Victor's story deepens. After recounting the warmth of his childhood, the love that wrapped him like a protective shield, Victor turns to the moment. Everything changed the moment curiosity hardened into obsession. At the University of Ingolstadt, Victor enters a world where knowledge no longer resembles the comforting lessons of home. Here, science is not gentle, it is sharp, exacting, uncompromising. It demands sacrifice, and Victor is more than willing to give it. His professors teach him anatomy, physiology, chemistry, the limits of the human body, but each new lesson only sharpens a hunger he has carried for years. A hunger not to simply study life but to master it. Victor becomes enchanted by a question that should have terrified him. What if life is not a miracle at all? What if it is a mechanism, a system, one that can be rebuilt, rewired, recreated by human hands? Where others see mystery, Victor sees challenge. Where others see boundaries, he sees possibility. And so, he begins to push. He spends countless nights in the laboratory, amidst jars of preserved organs, skeletal remains, and instruments cold as steel. He studies decomposition not with horror, but with fascination. He dissects corpses piece by piece, as if knowledge lies hidden in the silence of death. His professors see brilliance in him. His classmates see strangeness. But Victor sees only the path ahead, glowing with promise, trembling with danger. There comes a moment, quiet, almost unremarkable, when the idea crystallizes. Not just the idea of understanding life, but the idea of creating it. The concept takes root in him like a fever. Why should life be an exclusive gift of nature? Why should birth be confined to the laws of biology? Why shouldn't a man of vision, a man of genius, step into that sacred realm? Victor begins to dream of a world where he is not just a student of nature but its rival. And once that vision forms, it never lets him go. He isolates himself, withdrawing from friends, letters, the outside world. Henry Clerval writes to him with concern. Elizabeth misses him deeply. But Victor hardly notices. The world beyond his laboratory fades like a forgotten dream. He works through days and nights until time itself loses shape. The seasons change unnoticed. His health declines, pale skin, trembling hands, sunken eyes, but he pays no attention. Ambition fuels him more than food ever could. Victor describes this period with a chilling mixture of nostalgia and dread. He remembers the thrill, the pounding excitement of standing on the brink of a discovery no human had ever touched. But he also remembers the terror, the shadow of what he was becoming. He says he pursued nature to her hiding places, a phrase filled not with respect, but intrusion. He was not learning from the natural world, he was violating it. And with each step toward the impossible, a new truth becomes clear. Victor Frankenstein was not simply doing science. He was crossing a boundary the universe never intended to be crossed. He admits to Walton and to us that he did not pause to consider consequences. He did not think about responsibility. He did not ponder what would happen after he succeeded. His mind was consumed by one thought: I will create life. And like all obsessions, it devoured him long before his creation ever could. By the end of chapter 2, Victor stands on the threshold of the unthinkable. The pieces are gathered, the methods prepared, the ambition burning too brightly to extinguish. The storm is coming, the creation is near, and Victor is already lost. Chapter 3, The Night of Creation. Victor's story moves toward the moment he has been chasing, the moment when ambition finally crosses the threshold into action. Months pass in a haze of sleepless nights, rotting smells, and scientific fervor so intense it blurs into madness. Victor speaks of this time not with pride, but with a tremor in his voice, as if he still cannot believe what he allowed himself to become. He scours graveyards, dissecting rooms, slaughterhouses. He gathers bones from forgotten tombs. He steals sinews, muscles, organs, anything he needs to build the being of his dreams. His lantern glows over piles of limbs that once belonged to real people, each piece a fragment of a life now reduced to raw material. He becomes a thief of death, a collector of corpses, not because he is evil but because he is blinded. Blinded by the hunger to achieve something no human had ever dared. Blinded by the belief that genius frees a man from morality. Victor tells Walton, I was creating a being like myself, or better than myself. Better, stronger, more resilient. A triumph of engineering, not biology. And with each piece he assembles, his arrogance grows. He does not see the horror of his actions, only the glory of what he imagines will be the result. As his creation takes shape, Victor's health collapses. His skin turns ghostly. His eyes burn with feverish intensity. His hands tremble as he works, driven by an obsession that has long devoured reason. But he pushes forward, consumed by a promise he made to himself that he would unveil something magnificent. Then comes the night the world of the living and the dead collide. A storm brews outside as Victor assembles the final components. Electricity crackles through the air, an invisible force Mary Shelley understood decades before science explained it. Victor has discovered a method to infuse life into dead flesh. He never tells Walton exactly what the method is, because the details do not matter. What matters is the moment. The room is dim, the instruments humming with unnatural energy. Victor stands over the massive form he has created, 8 feet tall, built large because smaller parts proved too intricate for his trembling hands. He whispers the words that haunt him for the rest of his life. On a dreary night of November, I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. He activates the mechanism. A surge of power races through the body. The chest rises, the limbs twitch, the eyes, those lifeless, dull eyes, open. And in that instant Victor sees not triumph but horror. The creature breathes, it moves, it looks at him. But instead of the glorious, radiant being Victor had imagined, instead of a masterpiece, he sees a figure stitched from decay, animated but not alive, powerful but not beautiful. Its yellow eyes glow with a strange mixture of confusion and hunger. Its skin barely covers the muscles beneath, stretched too tightly over the enormous frame. Its lips pull back from its teeth in a grotesque approximation of a smile. Victor feels his blood freeze. He runs. He abandons his creation the first breath it takes, the first moment it reaches out instinctively, desperately, toward its creator. Victor is gone. This is the true birth of tragedy. Not in the moment the creature opens its eyes, but in the moment Victor closes his heart. He flees the room. He collapses in terror. He calls his creation a catastrophe, a demon, a thing, before it can even speak, before it can understand itself. He wanted to be a god. But when faced with the life he brought into the world, he behaves like a coward. He abandons the being he made, the being who never asked to exist. Victor's voice breaks as he recalls this moment. He tells Walton, I had worked for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this, I had deprived myself of rest and health. But now that I had succeeded, the beauty of the dream vanished. And in the emptiness left behind, fear rushes in like a tide. He spends the night wandering the streets of Ingolstadt, trembling, hallucinating, consumed by regret he cannot name. When he returns to his room at dawn, the creature has vanished. For now. But the consequences of that night, the night Victor brought life into the world, and immediately rejected, it will follow him across continents, across years, across every boundary he believed he controlled. The creation has begun its lonely journey, and Victor Frankenstein has begun his slow descent into guilt, dread, and irreversible ruin. Chapter 4: Abandonment, and the Birth of a Monster. Victor's confession now drifts into one of the most painful and revealing chapters of his life, the aftermath of creation, and the first seeds of destruction. After fleeing his laboratory in terror, Victor collapses under the weight of what he has done. For 2 years he worked tirelessly, obsessively, consumed by the dream of conquering death, but the instant his creation opened its yellow, confused eyes, the dream shattered. What replaced it was not pride but disgust, not awe but dread. Victor falls into a feverish haze, unable to distinguish waking from nightmare. He wanders the streets in fear that the creature is following him. Every shadow becomes a threat. Every whisper of wind sounds like footsteps behind him. He has unleashed something into the world, and now he wants only to forget. It is only by chance or fate that his friend Henry Clerval arrives in Ingolstadt. Henry, warm-hearted and loyal, becomes the grounding force Victor desperately needs. Seeing him is like seeing a piece of his old life again, a reminder of innocence, of joy, of a world untouched by corpses and stitched limbs. But Henry is also Victor's mirror. Where Victor looks hollow, Henry looks vibrant. Where Victor hides his nightmares, Henry radiates hope. Where Victor runs from responsibility, Henry naturally offers it. Henry sees immediately that Victor is ill both in body and mind. He nurses him through his delirium, stays at his bedside, wipes the sweat from his brow. And Victor says nothing, not about the creature, not about his crime, not about the horror he set loose. Clerval saves his life, but Victor refuses to let him save the truth. Weeks pass before Victor recovers enough strength to stand. His body heals, but his conscience does not. He avoids the laboratory. He avoids discussion of his studies. He avoids anything that might force him to confront what he created. And then, slowly, the world begins to reassemble around him. Letters from Elizabeth full of love and worry. Walks around the town. Time spent with Henry, which almost makes Victor feel like himself again. Almost. For even as he tries to return to normalcy, one fear grows larger in his mind. Where is the creature now? Victor does not know. He does not look. He tells himself that perhaps the creature wandered off and died, as if neglect could erase his responsibility. But abandonment is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. Because while Victor tries to forget the being he brought into the world, that being is learning to survive alone. Victor shares with Walton a line that haunts the entire novel. I had desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished. The dream didn't vanish. He did. He abandoned the creature at the moment of its birth, newborn and terrified, left to navigate a world that recoiled at its appearance. This is the true birth of the monster, not in the laboratory, but in the rejection that follows. Victor says he expected gratitude, admiration, or perhaps even worship from his creation. But Victor never stopped to consider the creature's experience. What does it mean to open your eyes for the first time and see your creator flee in horror? What does it mean to reach out for connection and be met with hatred? Victor's guilt hovers over every sentence he speaks. Not the guilt of having done something evil, but the guilt of being too weak to face the consequences of his genius. He tries to bury it. He tries to pretend that life can return to normal. But fate refuses him that mercy. Just when he dares to believe the worst is behind him, a letter arrives from home. A letter carrying news so devastating, so unexpected, that Victor's world collapses, once more forcing him to return to Geneva. For tragedy has already begun to unfold, and Victor Frankenstein will soon learn that a creation abandoned does not disappear. It learns, it grows, it remembers. Chapter 5: The First Crime of the Abandoned. Victor's fragile sense of normalcy ends the moment he receives a letter from his father. A letter filled not with warmth, but with grief. His youngest brother William, the bright child of the Frankenstein family full of joy, curiosity, and innocence, has been murdered. The news strikes Victor like a bolt of lightning. He reads the words again and again, unable to believe them, unable to absorb their reality.
Murdered in Geneva.
In his home, in the one place he believed untouched by darkness. Victor collapses under the weight of guilt long before he knows the truth. For in the shadow of this tragedy, a terrifying possibility emerges, a possibility he tries desperately to deny. Could his creation have done this? Could the being he abandoned be capable of such violence? He rushes home immediately, driven by fear and anguish. But Geneva is no longer the warm, vibrant place of his childhood. It feels colder, quieter, a city carrying grief like a shroud. And worse, someone has already been accused of the crime. Justine Moritz, a young woman who grew up in the Frankenstein household, loved by the entire family, gentle and kind-hearted. The evidence against her is circumstantial and suspicious. A locket belonging to William was found in her pocket, a locket Victor knows the creature could have planted. But Victor says nothing. He remains silent, frozen by guilt, paralyzed by fear that speaking the truth will expose the horror he created. He watches the trial, knowing Justine is innocent. He sees her stand alone, trembling, insisting she did not harm William, and he does nothing. This is the quiet cruelty of Victor Frankenstein, not the crime of creating life, but the crime of refusing responsibility. He tells Walton, voice trembling with shame, "This was the first hapless victim to my unhallowed arts." Justine is found guilty. She is sentenced to death, and Victor, consumed by guilt he refuses to share, can only whisper apologies that come far too late. 2 deaths now stain his conscience, 1 child, 1 innocent woman. But the true horror has yet to reveal itself, because on the night Victor returns to the site of William's murder on a stormy evening heavy with dread, he sees a figure illuminated by lightning. Tall, massive, grotesque, unmistakable. His creation. The creature stands among the trees, watching the city below, watching Victor, watching the world that rejected him. The sight steals Victor's breath. He realizes instantly, not through logic, but through instinct, that the creature killed his brother. That the being he abandoned now roams the earth with violence in its hands. Lightning flashes again, revealing its twisted expression. Not malicious but wounded, lonely, burning with a confusion that has curdled into rage. Victor knows then that the creature's first crime was not murder. Its first crime was being born into rejection, and the guilt of that birth belongs entirely to him. He flees from the sight, haunted by the knowledge that he not destiny, not evil, but he is the architect of this tragedy. By the end of chapter 5, Victor begins to understand a terrible truth. The monster did not come into the world evil. It became a monster because it was denied a chance to be anything else. And far worse horrors lie ahead. Chapter 6, The Creature's Voice, a story no one wanted to hear. Up to this point, we have heard only Victor's side of the story, his ambition, his terror, his guilt. But now, in one of the most remarkable shifts in all of literature, we finally hear the other voice, the voice of the being he abandoned. The creature does not begin with anger. He does not begin with violence. He begins with loneliness. After opening his eyes on that cold November night, the creature found himself alone in a world that recoiled at his appearance. Confused, shivering, newly born, yet treated like a monster, he wandered into the wilderness not with purpose, but with instinct. His first memories are not of hatred, they are of confusion, fear, cold, hunger. He discovered fire and burned himself. He discovered food and learned what nourished him and what poisoned him. He learned to walk, to survive, to observe. He learned not as a monster but as a child, and slowly, painfully, he began to understand what it meant to be a creature without a place in the world. One day, he found a small cottage, modest, quiet, filled with the warmth of human presence he longed for. A blind man named de Lacy lived there with his son and daughter. From the shadows, the creature watched them. He watched their kindness. He watched their struggles. He watched the simple, tender ways they cared for each other. He learned language from them. He learned emotion from them. He learned what it meant to love not romantically, but deeply, instinctively, purely. And here lies the tragedy at the heart of chapter 6. The creature was not born a monster. He was born with the capacity for goodness, because goodness was the first thing he admired in the world. He chopped wood for the family in secret. He rescued food for them during harsh seasons. He left small gifts on their doorstep. He wanted nothing but acceptance, nothing but a place in their hearts. And when he finally gathered enough courage to step forward to reveal himself, to speak the words he learned, to show the kindness he carried, he was met with terror. The blind father, unable to see his appearance, welcomed him with the compassion the creature had dreamed of. But when the children returned and saw him, they screamed. They struck him. They drove him away. The only humans he had ever loved, the only family he ever wanted, rejected him violently. This moment breaks something inside him. The creature tells Victor, "I was benevolent, My soul glowed with love and humanity. But am I not alone, miserably alone? He begins to understand a devastating truth: humans will never see him as anything but a monster. Not because of who he is, but because of what he looks like. And thus innocence begins to decay. Not naturally, not inevitably, but through pain, through humiliation, through endless rejection. The creature's voice shakes with grief as he describes the moment he turned toward darkness. If I cannot inspire love, I will cause fear. He admits to killing William not out of malice, but out of rage, despair, and the recognition that Victor was the source of his torment. But before fully embracing vengeance, the creature makes one final plea, one last request that could still save him: make me a companion. Someone like me, someone who will not hate me. He does not ask for power. He does not ask for revenge. He asks for something profoundly human: a friend, a partner, a being who can look at him without terror, a soul who can return his longing for connection. He tells Victor, I am malicious because I am miserable. It is one of the most heartbreaking confessions in all of literature. And now the burden returns to Victor. The creature offers a bargain, a promise to leave humanity forever if Victor will only grant him the gift of companionship. One creation has already led to tragedy. The next could determine the fate of both men and perhaps the world. Victor hesitates, and in that hesitation lie the seeds of every catastrophe yet to come. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point, a choice that changes everything. Victor now stands at one of the most morally complex crossroads of his life, a moment where compassion, fear, guilt, and responsibility collide. The creature has finished telling his story. Not with threats, but with vulnerability. Not with arrogance, but with pain so raw it unsettles even Victor's hardened conscience. He ends with a plea: make me a mate, someone like me. Someone who will not recoil at my face. For the first time, Victor sees his creation not as a monstrosity, but as a being wounded by the very world he was thrown into, a world Victor himself abandoned him to. The creature's logic is painfully clear. He does not seek domination. He does not demand to be part of human society. He simply wants companionship, the one thing every living being craves. But he also offers a warning: if Victor refuses, if he continues to deny him even the smallest chance at happiness, the creature will take revenge on everything Victor loves, and Victor knows he is capable of it. Victor is torn. On one side lies the weight of morality. He brought this being into the world. Is it not his responsibility to mitigate the suffering he caused? On the other side lies terror. If he creates a second creature, will they together unleash even greater horrors? Will he be responsible for a new race of beings beyond human control? Victor feels the eyes of the world on this decision, the eyes of future generations, the eyes of his own conscience, the eyes of the creature, burning with desperate hope. And yet even in his uncertainty, Victor hears the creature's final argument: my passions are stronger and more seductive than yours. I will love my companion. Our existence will be harmless if we are at peace. It is the closest thing the creature has ever spoken to a prayer. Victor considers the loneliness he witnessed in this being, the abandonment, the rejection, the violence born not from evil but from misery. Despite everything, Victor feels sympathy. And he does something he will later regret. With every fiber of his soul, he agrees. He promises to create a second being, a companion built with the same hands that once trembled in fear, the moment his first creation opened its eyes. But Victor attaches one condition: this new creature must leave Europe forever, taking the first creature with her, living in isolation, never to trouble mankind again. The creature accepts, immediately overcome with relief so profound it softens his voice, his posture, even his rage. For a moment, just a moment, he looks almost human. Then he disappears into the forest, leaving Victor with the unbearable weight of his promise. The decision plunges Victor into a new kind of agony. Every moral instinct twists inside him. He is torn between duty and dread, between compassion and fear, between the responsibility of a creator and the terror of creating again. He begins preparations for the second creature, but his mind feels fractured, haunted by visions of what this new being might become. A companion, a monster, a threat to humanity. He imagines them breeding. He imagines them stronger than humans. He imagines a world where he unleashed not one horror, but an entire lineage. His stomach turns, his hands shake. His heart feels trapped between guilt and prophecy. But a promise is a promise. He must build again. Before he begins this second creation, Victor decides to travel to gather materials, to escape Geneva's grief, and perhaps, silently, to delay the inevitable. He travels with Henry Clerval. Dear Henry, whose presence warms Victor's broken spirit. They journey through beautiful landscapes, rivers, forests, mountains, peaceful scenery that contrasts painfully with Victor's inner turmoil. Henry sees the world with joy. Victor sees it with dread. This chapter becomes a study in contrast. The world is beautiful. Victor is broken. Henry is full of life. Victor is full of fear. At times, Victor almost allows himself to feel hope, to believe he can outrun destiny. But destiny does not loosen its grip, because wherever Victor goes, he knows the creature is watching, waiting, expecting him to fulfill the promise, and Victor feels the pressure like a hand around his throat. By the end of chapter 7, we see a man suspended over a precipice, bound by obligation, hunted by guilt, terrified of the thing he must now create. Victor's first creation was born from arrogance. His second will be born from fear, and fear. Chapter 8, the second creation, fear in the shape of a woman. Victor's journey now turns darker than ever. He has promised the creature a companion, not out of courage, not out of hope, but out of fear. Fear of what the creature will do if denied, fear of further deaths, fear of a vengeance that has already tasted blood. And so he begins again. But this time everything is different. The first creation was fueled by ambition, a burning desire to break the boundaries of nature. The second is fueled by dread, a reluctant descent back into the madness he once escaped. Victor travels to the remote Orkney Islands, a cluster of wind-swept rocks at the edge of civilization, where the land is barren, the winds unending, and the sea groans like a living beast. Here, far from prying eyes, Victor sets up a miserable workshop in a ruined hut. There are no professors now, no laboratories, no illusions of grandeur, only guilt, dread, and the sounds of the storm outside. He begins gathering materials once again, but this time every act feels like a violation. Every limb he prepares feels like a betrayal of his own sanity. He cannot escape the memory of his first creation, the moment those yellow eyes opened, the moment his dream curdled into horror, and yet he works because he promised. Meanwhile, Henry Clerval travels the world with childlike wonder, writing letters home filled with joy, describing mountains, rivers, and cultures with delight only Henry can feel. Henry sees beauty everywhere. Victor sees warning. As Victor labors in secrecy, paranoia gnaws at him. He feels watched. He feels followed. Every flicker of shadow becomes a threat. Every creak of the hut sounds like footsteps. And then, one night the threat becomes real. He sees a familiar silhouette in the distance. Tall, broad, motionless, waiting. The creature has found him. It watches him through the window, not with violence, but with expectation. The promise must be fulfilled. Victor's hands tremble. His breathing falters. The terror that once fueled him now grips him like a vise. Every day, the creature's presence inches closer. Every night, Victor feels its breath in the darkness. He continues his work, piece by agonizing piece. But the more he constructs the female creature, the more his imagination spirals. What if she rejects the first creature? What if she hates him? What if she is more dangerous? What if together they create more beings, multiplying into a race humanity cannot defeat? Victor sees a future filled with creatures stronger than humans, faster, more resilient, a future he himself unleashed. The thought becomes unbearable. One night, as the creature watches through the window, Victor reaches a breaking point. He looks at the half-finished being, her lifeless limbs, her silent form, and something snaps inside him. He tears her apart. He destroys the second creation with his own hands, shredding the body into pieces, scattering the remains across the floor. The creature sees everything. It lets out a sound, not a roar, not a scream, but a guttural, broken cry that echoes with betrayal deeper than words. Victor stands trembling, breathing hard, convinced that he has done the right thing, that he has prevented a second catastrophe. But he has also made an enemy whose grief is now indistinguishable from fury. The creature looks at him with burning eyes and says, "I shall be with you on your wedding night." It is not a threat. It is a promise. Then it disappears into the blackness, leaving Victor shattered, and the wind howling through the ruined hut like a warning from the universe itself. Victor realizes, perhaps too late, that by destroying the female creature, he has destroyed the creature's last hope for companionship. He has chosen humanity's safety but condemned his own future. The creature will not forgive this, and the true nightmare, the one Victor thought he had already lived, is only beginning. Chapter 9. The murder of Henry Clerval. Vengeance becomes personal. Victor's decision to destroy the female creature did not save him. It doomed him. From the moment he tore apart the second creation, the creature's rage hardened into something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous than simple anger. It became purpose. And that purpose was devastation. After delivering the chilling warning, "I shall be with you on your wedding night," The creature vanishes into the darkness, leaving Victor alone with the horrifying weight of what he has triggered. From this point forward, the story shifts. No longer is Victor running from guilt. He is running from vengeance. Victor flees the Orkneys, desperate to escape the creature, desperate to outrun the consequences he knows are coming. But consequences do not disappear. They follow. He sets off by boat, exhausted, delirious, and half-mad with terror. Storms batter him. Waves drag him off course. He loses control as the sea carries him far from the place he destroyed the creature's last hope. When he finally reaches shore, villagers surround him not with welcome, but with suspicion. A body has been found. A man beloved by many, strangled. The villagers accuse Victor of murder. But the truth is far worse than their accusation. Because when the corpse is brought to him, Victor sees the face of the victim and his world collapses. It is Henry Clerval, his friend, his companion, the one pure light left in his life. Henry, who traveled with joy, who wrote letters home full of wonder, who believed the world was beautiful even when Victor saw only darkness. Henry, who once nursed Victor back to life. Henry, who did nothing but love, listen, and give, now lies dead because of Victor's broken promise, because of Victor's fear, because of Victor's choices. Victor's scream fills the courtroom. He collapses into madness. His body trembles uncontrollably. His mind shatters under grief so heavy it crushes him from the inside. The creature has struck him in the deepest way possible. Not by killing Victor, but by killing his joy, his friendship, his last fragment of innocence. This is the creature's vengeance. I am miserable, so I will make you miserable. Victor falls into a fever again, a sickening echo of the illness he suffered after the first creation. He relives every moment of guilt, every denial, every mistake. But this time, something is different. He no longer sees the creature as a tragedy. He now sees him as an enemy. The shift is subtle but decisive. Victor Frankenstein, once driven by fear, now becomes driven by fury. He vows revenge. He vows to hunt the creature across the earth. He vows that either he or his creation will die. But beneath that rage lies something rawer, something he refuses to admit. He created the being that murdered Henry. He abandoned him. He denied him compassion. He destroyed the one chance the creature had to escape loneliness. Victor's rage is real, but it is built on the foundation of his own crimes. After weeks of illness, he is released from accusation, for the magistrate sees that Victor is far too broken, far too devastated, to have carried out the murder. But Victor is not free. Henry is dead, and the creature is waiting. Waiting for the next strike, waiting for the next suffering, waiting for Victor to realize that vengeance, once unleashed, does not end. It escalates. Victor returns home to Geneva, but the warmth of home has evaporated. His father, aged by grief, tries to comfort him. Elizabeth tries to rekindle hope. But Victor is hollow. Every heartbeat feels like a countdown to disaster. The creature's promise echoes through his mind: I shall be with you on your wedding night. Not a threat, a promise. Victor prepares for a nightmare he knows is coming, and yet he walks toward it anyway. Because destiny is no longer something he can avoid. It is something he must face. In this chapter, Victor Frankenstein ceases to be a creator running from guilt and becomes a man hunted by his own creation. A man whose tragedy is no longer theoretical, it is personal, it is bloody, it is irreversible. And the creature once a victim has now become Victor's shadow, a shadow that will follow him until the very end. Chapter 10. The Wedding Night. Love Meets the Shadow. Victor Frankenstein returns home carrying a weight that no human spirit should bear, the weight of guilt, of grief, of vengeance, of a promise spoken by a creature he created and betrayed: I shall be with you on your wedding night. This sentence becomes the drumbeat of Victor's life. It haunts his days. It stalks his nights. It coils around every breath he takes. But despite the terror that thickens the air around him, Victor agrees to marry Elizabeth, his childhood companion, his long-standing love, the one pure presence that has always illuminated his darkest moments. Elizabeth, unaware of the storm Victor carries, dreams of a gentle life, a home, peace, a future together. But Victor sees something else, a knife hovering over that dream. Still, he believes, or tries desperately to believe, that the threat is directed at him, not at her. So he prepares. He carries pistols. He scans the shadows. He keeps watch as if his heartbeat itself were an alarm bell. Victor convinces himself that he can confront the creature and end the nightmare. But deep down, he knows the truth: he is no match for what he created. The wedding day arrives. The ceremony is beautiful, delicate, a moment where, for the briefest time, light struggles to outshine darkness. Elizabeth glows with quiet joy. Victor tries to mirror her happiness, but the smile on his face is hollow, strained by anxiety that coils around him like frost. After the ceremony, they travel to a secluded lake house, a peaceful retreat meant for love, but destined for tragedy. The wind howls outside. Storm clouds gather overhead. The night feels wrong, heavy, electric. Elizabeth notices Victor's tension. She asks what troubles him. She begs him to share his burden, but Victor cannot speak the truth. He believes foolishly, vitally, that he must face the creature alone. He hears footsteps outside. He leaps to the window. But the darkness reveals nothing. He believes the creature is coming for him. He whispers to Elizabeth, "Stay here. I will protect you." And then he leaves her alone. It is a decision that seals her fate. The moment Victor is gone, the creature enters. There is no struggle. There is no chase. There is only terror, swift, merciless, silent. Victor hears the scream. A scream that tears through the house, through the wind, through the last fragile thread of hope in his life. He rushes back to the room. He throws open the door, and there she is. Elizabeth, lifeless, broken, strangled by the hands of the creature Victor created. Her body hangs like a question the world cannot answer. Why did Victor believe the creature would come for him, and not for the one he loved most? In that terrible moment, Victor collapses over her body, shaking with the kind of grief that makes sound itself seem unworthy. The creature appears at the window, a towering silhouette against the storm, eyes blazing with triumph and agony intertwined. He grins, not out of joy, but out of the fulfillment of vengeance. He points at Victor, a symbolic gesture that freezes Victor's blood, then disappears into the night, leaving Victor with a silence more violent than any scream. The death of Elizabeth destroys what little remained of Victor's soul. His father, upon hearing the news, collapses from heartbreak and dies shortly after. This is the creature's vengeance in full form: first William, then Justine, then Henry, now Elizabeth, and finally Victor's father. The creature has taken every person Victor ever loved. He has left him utterly alone, mirroring the loneliness the creature himself endured at the beginning. It is a perfect, devastating symmetry. Victor understands this. I called forth a being that ruined me and my family. But what he does next is not surrender. It is a transformation. Grief turns to fury. Fury turns to obsession. Obsession turns to purpose. Victor swears an oath, not to gods, not to fate, but to the shattered remains of his life. He will hunt the creature. Across valleys, across mountains, across deserts, across continents, across the frozen ends of the earth. He will not stop. He will not rest. He will not forgive. The creature has become his tormentor, his shadow, and now his destiny. And so begins the final chase: man hunting creation, creator hunting monster, two beings bound together by hatred, mirroring each other in their suffering. This chapter marks the end of Victor's humanity and the beginning of the final pursuit, a pursuit that will lead him into the endless white wasteland, where he will eventually be found by Captain Walton, bringing the story full circle. Chapter 11, The Final Hunt, a creator chasing his creation. Victor Frankenstein stands on the ruins of everything he once loved. Elizabeth gone, his father gone, Henry Clerval gone, William and Justine gone. The creature has stripped him of every bond, every comfort, every joy. Now, in the ashes of that devastation, Victor finds what he believes is purpose, a purpose twisted by grief, sharpened by rage, and fueled by a fire that no longer seeks understanding but annihilation. He swears revenge, not quietly, not symbolically, but with a vow that consumes the last fragile pieces of his humanity. He will hunt the creature to the ends of the earth. He will cross mountains, deserts, oceans. No distance is too far, no storm too fierce, no suffering too great. Victor, once the arrogant scientist, is now a haunted man with a single obsession: destroy the demon I unleashed. The hunt begins. Victor follows the creature across Europe, through forests where the echo of footsteps feels like mockery, across rivers where ice breaks under his weight, through villages where terrified people whisper about a monstrous traveler with superhuman strength. Everywhere Victor goes, he finds traces, footprints too large to belong to any man, trees snapped like twigs, ruins of shelters hastily abandoned. The creature leaves supplies, hints, clues, as if inviting Victor to continue. This is not escape. This is a game, a cruel one. And Victor plays it with manic devotion. He suffers hunger, exhaustion, illness. His body deteriorates, but his purpose does not. He forgets sleep, food, comfort, rest. The roles have reversed. Victor is now the wanderer. Victor is now the lonely outcast. Victor is now the one consumed by obsession. He has become what the creature once was. This haunting symmetry is at the heart of Chapter 11. Victor's voice trembles as he admits, "I was cursed by some devil and carried about with me my eternal hell." The creature is no longer the only monster in the story. Victor's obsession has made him one as well, a man hollowed out by vengeance, living only to destroy what he created. The chase pushes both beings into the harshest environments imaginable. They travel through Russia, across frigid plains, into the frozen north. Victor speaks of the creature in a strange, almost reverent way. He is faster than any man. He subsists on little. He endures heat and cold with a superhuman tolerance. The creature is leading him somewhere to a final confrontation neither can avoid. And Victor follows with the desperation of a soul clinging to the last thing that gives him reason to continue. Then one day, at the edge of the Arctic world, Victor finds a letter left for him in a frozen cave, written by the creature himself. In it, the creature mocks him, yet also speaks with a strange, tragic clarity. You will find me. But it will be a struggle worthy of both of us. The creature is not afraid. The creature is ready. This final battle is not just vengeance anymore, it is destiny. Victor confesses to Walton that in these moments he no longer felt entirely human. His rage had fused with the icy landscape, each frozen breath a reminder that he and the creature were locked in a dance neither could escape. He followed the creature onto drifting sheets of ice. He battled storms that tore at the flesh. He survived nights where the temperature could kill a man in minutes. Yet Victor continued, because his rage can warm even the coldest wilderness. Eventually his strength fails. He collapses on a drifting slab of ice, his body nearly broken, his mind flickering between consciousness and delirium. He would have died there alone, forgotten, just another frozen body swallowed by the Arctic, if not for the ship that spotted him. Captain Walton's ship. And now, the frame of the story closes. We finally understand how Victor arrived on that vessel half dead, haunted, trembling, still clinging to a purpose that has become indistinguishable from madness. He looks Walton in the eyes and says, "You seek knowledge and wisdom, as I once did. And I ardently hope that the gratification of your wishes may not be a serpent to sting you, as mine has been." Victor is not just telling his story, he is warning Walton, and us. Because the final chapter is approaching a reckoning, a confession, and a confrontation between the creature and his dying creator. The hunt is not over. But Victor is. Chapter 12, the final confession. Two souls at the edge of the world. Victor Frankenstein is dying. His body is failing, his strength nearly gone, his voice trembling with the last shreds of willpower. But his mind, that restless, tortured mind, clings to one final purpose, to make Walton understand, to warn him, to keep him from walking the same path. Victor tells Walton that ambition without conscience leads only to ruin, that the hunger to surpass nature, to dominate life, to bend the world to one's desires, is a hunger that devours the one who carries it. Walton listens and slowly, painfully, begins to realize that Victor's story is not merely a tragedy. It is a mirror, a warning to every person who chases greatness without considering the consequences. Victor's voice weakens, his breath shortens. And then, in a quiet moment surrounded by ice, loneliness, and a stranger who unexpectedly became his final witness, Victor Frankenstein dies. Not with a scream, not with drama, but with a kind of exhausted surrender, as if death were nothing more than a release from a burden he carried too long. Walton covers his body with respect, with sorrow, with the weight of a man who has just heard the most devastating confession of a lifetime. But the story is not over, because the moment Victor dies, the creature appears. He steps onto the ship like a shadow, solidifying in the darkness, towering silent, his massive frame illuminated by the dim lantern light. Walton freezes. This is the being Victor described. This is the monster who killed, who suffered, who wandered the earth with heartbreak in his chest and vengeance in his hands. But the creature does not roar. He does not attack. He stands over Victor's body and begins to weep. Deep, ragged sobs tear from him, the kind of grief that shakes the bones. The kind that reveals a truth few have ever understood. He did not hate Victor. He hated the pain Victor caused. He hated the loneliness. He hated the rejection. But he also loved him in a twisted, tragic way. Victor was his creator, his origin, his only connection to the world. Without Victor, the creature is utterly, irreversibly alone. He touches Victor's cold hand and whispers words Walton never forgets. "He was my creator, and in his death, I am miserable once more." He speaks not like a monster, not like a demon, but like a soul cracked open by grief. He confesses that he never asked to exist. He confesses that every act of violence was born from suffering, not malice. He confesses that each murder cut into him as deeply as it did into Victor. He says, "Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous." It is the most heartbreaking truth of all. He was not born evil. He was shaped by cruelty. The creature now stands between two worlds, human and inhuman, loved and unloved, alive and dead inside. Walton watches him, astonished, unsure whether to fear him or pity him. But the creature does not threaten him. He does not rage. Instead, he says he is ready to die. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly, and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. He will travel far into the Arctic wilderness, build his own pyre, and burn himself to ash. Not out of cowardice, but out of remorse. Not to escape punishment, but because there is no one left in the world to care for him, to understand him, to speak to him. He was made by human hands but never given a human heart to love him back. He walks to the ship's railing. The wind screams across the ice. Snow whirls like ghosts in the night. And with a final look at Victor's body, filled with grief, regret, and a strange kind of devotion, the creature steps off the ship and disappears into the darkness. Toward death, toward silence. Toward the only ending he believes he deserves. Walton watches him fade into the Arctic void, becoming smaller, dimmer, until he is nothing more than a silhouette swallowed by the endless night. And that is how the story ends, not with triumph, not with glory, not with good conquering evil, but with two beings bound together by suffering, both undone by a single moment of arrogance. Victor Frankenstein dies seeking redemption. The creature dies seeking peace, and the ice closes over their footsteps, leaving behind one of the greatest tragedies ever written, a tragedy not about monsters, but about what happens when we fail to take responsibility for the life we create. Thank you for walking with me through this haunting journey. Frankenstein is not merely a story about science gone wrong. It is a story about loneliness, about responsibility, about the fragile threads that tie us to one another, threads that can hold us together or break us apart. Victor sought greatness, and in doing so, lost the very things that made life worth living. The creature sought love, and when denied it, fell into despair so deep it reshaped him into what the world feared. Two beings, bound together by ambition, fused by suffering, destroyed by the absence of compassion. This novel endures because it asks a question humanity still struggles to answer. What do we owe to the life we create? Whether it is a scientific discovery, a work of art, a relationship, or another human soul, our creations do not exist apart from us. They reflect us. They depend on us. They can save us or destroy us. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein at just 18 years old, yet she understood something timeless. The true monsters in our world are not born. They are made. And often, they are made by neglect. If this story has stayed with you, if it has stirred something within you, a question, a sadness, a spark of reflection, then perhaps it has done what Mary Shelley intended. As we close the final page, I invite you to carry one truth forward: compassion is not weakness. Responsibility is not a burden. And the lives we influence, however quietly, however unintentionally, shape the world far more deeply than we realize. Thank you for listening. Thank you for feeling. And thank you for sharing this time with me. This has been Velvet Audiobooks. Until our next story, may your nights be gentle, and your days be filled with light.